The door was unlocked. That's the only reason I walked in. She never left it unlocked. Not in 13 years. The house was quiet in that fake kind of way, like it had paused mid-breath, waiting for something to explode. My boots stuck slightly on the kitchen tile, still wet from her careless mopping. I could hear the clink of a glass upstairs. She didn't expect me back that night. That much was clear. I wasn't supposed to be there. I was supposed to be on the interstate, 3 hours deep into a drywall contract in Dyersville. But the site was flooded, and the crew turned back. I didn't call her. I thought maybe I'd pick up takeout and surprise her. I'd done that once before years ago, back when she used to kiss me on the neck and say, "You always think of me." She didn't say that anymore. Halfway up the stairs, I heard her voice. Not soft. Not shocked. Just casual. "Wait, he's not home. We've got time." Laughter. A man's laugh, deeper than mine. Confident. Smug. I froze with one hand on the banister. There was a framed photo of us right beside my knuckles. Christmas 2015. She wore that ugly silver sweater her mother gave her. I wore a dumb smile and didn't know any better. The bedroom door was cracked open just enough. I didn't look. I didn't need to. It wasn't what I saw, it was what I felt. Like the air itself had pulled away from me, recoiling from what it had witnessed. I turned around, walked back down the stairs, took my coat off the hook, stepped outside into the night like I was going out to check the mail. I didn't slam the door. I didn't shout her name. I didn't break anything. I just left. Because when someone leaves the door unlocked, they're not inviting you in, they're asking you to find your way out. And I did. I don't remember driving. I don't remember turning the ignition, or backing out of the driveway, or even checking the mirrors. I just remember the feeling, like my bones were hollow. Like I wasn't a person anymore, but just a shadow trying to stay upright. I parked 3 blocks down in front of a closed laundromat and sat there in the dark. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at the dust on my dashboard and tried to convince myself that maybe I'd misunderstood. But I hadn't. The image kept replaying in my head, not of what I saw, but what I heard. Her voice, soft and playful, like she used to speak to me when we were still new, when we still had inside jokes and made grocery trips feel romantic. Only now, that softness belonged to someone else. And her words. "We've got time." Time for what? To replace me? To erase the years we built with a stranger's cologne and cheap wine? I don't know what made me turn back. I had already left. I could have kept driving. I could have stayed at my brother's, or that rundown motel near the industrial park. But some part of me, the stupid, broken part, needed to see it with my own eyes. I didn't want to guess. I didn't want to wonder for the rest of my life if maybe I was overreacting. So I returned. I parked around the corner and walked the alley behind the house, the one where our dog used to chase squirrels and where she once told me we should build a garden. The backyard gate creaked like it always did, and I cursed myself for never fixing it. Every sound felt louder, sharper, like the world itself was watching. I stood beneath the window of our bedroom, the one that faced the back. It was open, just a crack. Enough. I wish I could say I heard nothing. I wish I could tell you that maybe they were just talking, or watching a movie, or doing something that wouldn't carve itself into my memory like glass. But they weren't. She was laughing. That same laugh from our early days. And then, silence. Rhythmic. Breathless. Intimate. Sounds I hadn't heard from her in years, not with me. Anyway. My fist clenched, not out of anger, but because I didn't know what else to do. I felt like a trespasser in my own life. I didn't stay long. Just enough. Enough to feel something snap. When I left again, I didn't take the truck. I walked. For miles. Through neighborhoods where porch lights flickered and sprinklers ticked like clocks counting down to something awful. I ended up at a diner just before dawn, the kind that never closes and smells like burnt coffee and disappointment. I sat in the corner booth and watched an elderly couple share a piece of pie, feeding each other like teenagers. And all I could think was, how does love survive like that? How did they keep it? And why couldn't I? I pulled out my phone. One message from her. "Where are you?" That was it. "No. I'm sorry. No. I love you." No panic. Just a question. Like she'd lost track of her keys. I didn't answer. I powered it off. And in that booth, surrounded by strangers, with my heart shredded in my chest, I realized something devastating. She didn't break my heart that night. She broke it slowly. Quietly. Over years of small betrayals, dismissive glances, withheld affection, and forgotten promises. That night was just the moment I finally stopped pretending I didn't feel it. She left the door unlocked. I walked out. But I didn't leave empty. I left knowing exactly who she'd become, and who I no longer wanted to be. When I finally walked back into town, the sun was rising behind the train yard, casting long orange streaks across the street like everything had been wiped clean except me. I didn't go home. I didn't even walk past it. I found a bench near the gas station on 5th, the one with the flickering fluorescent lights and the vending machine that's always out of everything but diet root beer. I sat down, unzipped my jacket, and just stared across the parking lot like maybe the answers were waiting in the trash bins. Around 7:40 a.m., my phone buzzed again. I had turned it back on, not because I wanted to talk to her, but because I needed to feel the weight of it. To know that this time, she would be the one waiting. The screen lit up with 5 missed calls, 3 from her, 2 from her sister, the same one who once told me Beth was wild before you, and might be wild after you. Then a new message popped up. Can we talk? Please. No punctuation. No detail. Just panic disguised as politeness. I didn't reply. Instead, I got up, walked across the street, and checked into the old motel behind the bowling alley. The place was a dump, but they didn't ask questions, and the heater worked. Room 204 smelled like cigarette smoke and lemon disinfectant. I sat on the bed and stared at the popcorn ceiling. There were cracks up there. The kind you don't notice unless you're still. Unless everything else in your life is too loud to ignore them anymore. I must have drifted off because the next thing I knew, it was afternoon. I had over a dozen texts. Beth, where are you? Beth, are you okay? Beth, Warren, seriously. Talk to me. Beth, I'm freaking out. Then one that made my chest go cold. Beth, are you doing something stupid? The irony of that one stung. Like I was the one who did something reckless. Like my silence was the betrayal. As if walking out the door quietly was more violent than what she did upstairs while I was still breathing under that same roof. I stood up, walked to the mirror, and looked at myself for the first time in what felt like days. I looked, not angry, not sad, just done. Like someone who'd stopped chasing the bus he knew would never stop for him. And then I did something unexpected. I called her back. Just once. She answered on the first ring. I could hear her breath catch, that split second where she didn't know what version of me was on the other end. Would I scream? Would I beg her to explain? I said 5 words. You don't need to lie. Silence. Then, Warren, I don't know what you think you saw. I cut her off. I didn't see it, Beth. I heard it. Her gasp was quiet but sharp, like a balloon deflating in her throat. That's not what it looked like. I mean, it just happened, and I was going to tell you. I swear. It wasn't planned. I almost laughed. Almost. I said, you left the door unlocked. Another pause. What? You left the door unlocked, Beth. You wanted me to know. Maybe not consciously. But you knew I'd find out eventually. She tried to spin it again. We're stammering. A few sniffles. But something shifted in her voice, not guilt, not fear, but anger. Like she was frustrated that I wasn't giving her the usual script. That I wasn't playing my part in the routine of damage control and blind forgiveness. And then she said it. Are you seriously going to throw away everything we've built over one stupid mistake? That's when I understood. She never saw it as betrayal. To her, it was just a blip, a wrinkle, something that happened because I'd been distant or we weren't connecting. She'd probably already rewritten the story in her head to cast me as the reason she strayed. I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself. I simply said, I'm not coming back. And I hung up. She called back immediately. Twice. I let it ring. Then I turned off the phone again, laid it on the nightstand next to the motel's TV remote that barely worked, and stared back at that ceiling. The cracks hadn't moved, but they felt deeper. Just like me. By the time night rolled in, the motel's neon vacancy sign buzzed like a dying firefly outside my window. I hadn't turned on the TV. I didn't need noise. My head was already loud, full of rewinds, unfinished sentences, and all the things I never said when it could have made a difference. Somewhere around 8 p.m., someone knocked on the door. I froze. For a second, I thought maybe it was her Kendra showing up in her black coat and messy ponytail, eyes glossy with staged tears, rehearsing lines about love and mistakes. But it wasn't her. It was Leo, my brother. He stood there in the doorway like a man caught between relief and fury. You've got people looking for you, you know, he said, brushing past me without waiting for an invitation. Beth's called me 3 times. She even tried our mother. I sat back down on the edge of the bed, hands folded like a child being scolded. Let her look. Leo crossed his arms. What the hell are you doing, Warren? You vanish. Leave your phone off, your house half open, and now you're hiding in a motel that smells like cigarettes and old soup. I didn't have an answer that would make sense to him. He ran a hand down his face. She's telling everyone you had some kind of breakdown, that you stormed out after a stupid fight about laundry or something. Do you want that to be the story people believe? That hit something deep. I hadn't even thought about what version of the truth she might be spreading. The idea that I would be the one painted unstable, unpredictable, maybe even dangerous. It felt like a second betrayal. Only this time, it wasn't whispered in the dark. It was broadcast in daylight to people I knew, people who'd hug her and whisper. He always seemed a little off. I finally looked at Leo and said, "She was sleeping with someone else." His jaw tightened. "Are you sure?" "I was in the house," I said quietly. "I heard everything." He didn't ask any more after that. He just sank into the chair by the window and let out a low, bitter laugh. God, I knew something was off with her last Thanksgiving. She didn't even ask how you were doing. Just kept talking about her new gym trainer and Pilates like she was prepping for a new life. I nodded slowly. She already was. We sat there in silence for a while. The kind that doesn't need filling. He eventually left, but before he did, he asked, "You going to disappear for good?" "I don't know," I said. Maybe just long enough for her to understand I wasn't background noise. After he left, I went for a walk. I didn't want to sleep. My legs took me further than I planned. Past the bowling alley, past the gas station, all the way to the little dog park she and I used to visit on Sunday mornings. It was empty now, just a squeaky gate swaying in the wind. I sat on the bench near the fence. Same one I used to sit on when Kendra would throw the ball and call our dog Buddy like it was a child. I remember thinking back then that I'd gotten lucky, that I'd somehow ended up with a woman who still laughed out loud and smiled at dogs like they were people. But it had all changed so quietly I hadn't noticed the room was flooding until I was already underwater. The next morning, my phone was full again. Missed calls, voicemails. One from her coworker, Darcy, who sounded genuinely concerned. "Hey, Warrenham, I don't know what's going on, but Beth is a mess and told everyone you might be not safe. Please just let someone know you're okay." Not safe. She was building a story, positioning herself as the frightened wife, abandoned, possibly by a man unraveling at the seams. I didn't call Darcy back. Instead, I opened my notes app and wrote one sentence. "If she ever lies about me again, I'll tell them everything." I saved it, not because I'd actually send it, but because I needed a record, a line in the sand. Then I opened the voice recorder, and I started talking. Not for her, not for anyone else, but for me. I recorded everything I remembered, from the first suspicious look she gave her phone, to the cold dinners, to the night she didn't notice I stood outside the room we once called ours. When I was done, I labeled it, version I never got to say, because she might have stolen the story. But the truth? That still belonged to me. 3 days passed before anyone saw me again. 3 days of living in the quiet rot of motel air, microwaving leftover pizza slices from the gas station across the street, and listening to the sound of other people living just on the other side of those thin motel walls. People laughing at game shows, arguing over room keys, getting intimate like no one was listening. I felt invisible, but not in the way I used to with her. This was different. This time, it was intentional. On the 4th day, I did something she never expected. I walked into the hardware store in town. Not to buy anything. I just walked. I needed to feel the rhythm of the world again, to know I hadn't evaporated completely. I didn't expect anyone to notice. But someone did. Her name was Marla. She worked there for years, a tall woman with dyed red hair and a voice like gravel soaked in honey. She took one look at me and raised an eyebrow. "Warren Fisher," she said. "Thought you were dead or on a fishing boat in Alaska." I smiled weakly. "Neither. Just needed some air." She narrowed her eyes. "Beth's been telling people you had a stress incident." She made air quotes with her fingers. "You okay?" There it was. The first crack in the story. Someone had finally spoken the words out loud. Someone who didn't completely buy what Beth had been selling. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I picked up a packet of drywall screws and stared at them like they held the secret to time travel. "I'm not crazy," I said finally. And I didn't run. I walked away. Because I had to. Marla tilted her head. "That sounds like a man who's seen something he can't unsee." I heard it, actually. She didn't press. Just gave a slow nod and said, "If you ever need a hammer or a baseball bat, aisle 5. No questions." It was the closest thing I'd felt to a moment of support since I left. I walked back to the motel through the alley behind the flower shop. As I passed the dumpsters, I spotted something on the ground. A postcard, folded in half. I don't know why I picked it up. Maybe because it had writing on the back. A child's handwriting. It said, "Dear Dad, please come back. Mommy's not funny when you're gone." It wasn't for me. It was old, faded, but it felt like the universe was playing games, handing me metaphors when I barely had room for real memories. That night, I turned my phone back on again. Dozens of missed calls. Beth's sister had tried once. Her mother, twice. The rest were all her. And then there was a text. From someone I hadn't expected, her friend Darcy. It read, "I don't know what happened between you and Beth, but I've known her 20 years, and even I don't believe her right now." Something inside me shifted. Not satisfaction. Not vengeance. Just clarity. I wasn't insane. I wasn't overreacting. People were starting to see through the illusion she'd spent so much time crafting. And she must have known it too, because the next morning, she sent a message that didn't sound rehearsed or performative. "Beth, can we please talk face to face? I'll come wherever you are. I just want to talk. Just talk." I stared at that message for 10 full minutes. Then I replied, "Okay." I didn't send an address. Just the name of the park where we once had a picnic on our second anniversary. I hadn't been there in years, but it felt symbolic. She could meet me where we once felt most like a team, before the rot crept in through the cracks neither of us patched. She arrived 15 minutes late. She was wearing sunglasses, but I could see the puffiness around her eyes. Her lipstick was too bright for her expression, like she was dressing me outside for a war she already lost inside. I didn't stand up when she approached the bench. She sat down, folded her hands in her lap, and said the words I honestly never thought I'd hear. I did it. I cheated. It wasn't the first time, and I don't even know why anymore. I thought it would make me feel something. It didn't. I just blinked. She kept going. "I lied to everyone. Told them you flipped out, had some kind of emotional breakdown, because I thought if I admitted the truth, I'd be the one they walked away from." She turned to me then. "But they are." Slowly. Even Darcy. Even my own sister. Silence. Wind moved the branches above us like a soft warning. "I didn't expect you to actually leave," she whispered. "You always forgave. You always stayed." And there it was. The quiet, raw truth beneath it all. She thought I was too weak to go. That I was too scared to step into the unknown without her. And maybe I had been. Until now. I stood up, brushed the back of my jeans, and looked down at her. "You didn't lose me, Beth," I said quietly. "You threw me away. And I left. Not just the park, but the version of myself who ever needed her to see me in order to exist." The night after that conversation in the park, I didn't feel triumphant. There was no music swelling, no sense of closure. Just a dull ache in my ribs and a feeling like I'd been holding my breath for a decade and finally exhaled too hard. I didn't go back to the motel. I drove until I ran out of gas in a town I'd only seen on a highway exit sign. Bought a sandwich from a gas station that tasted like wet cardboard and slept in the truck, the seatbelt buckle digging into my hip like a punishment. I didn't want to go back to anything that reminded me of her. Not our house, not my job, not even the beat-up couch at Leo's where I crashed in college. Everything had a fingerprint on it. Hers. Mine. Ours. So I started driving further. And then, somewhere in the middle of Tennessee, I turned off the highway, parked at a roadside diner with peeling paint and a crooked, open sign, and walked in like I belonged there. The waitress was in her 50s, wore a Dottie name tag, and gave me the kind of tired smile that said she'd seen every kind of man walk through that door, and she wasn't impressed by any of them. I ordered eggs and coffee. She poured without asking how I liked it. Halfway through the meal, I turned on my phone again. I'd been keeping it off more than on, and every time I powered it up, it felt like plugging into a power grid full of guilt, ghosts, and unwanted echoes. 2 new messages from Beth. The first one was one line. "I wish I had seen you before I broke you." The second one came 10 minutes later. "I keep looking at old pictures. The way you used to hold me. The way you smiled at me in that red flannel shirt. I don't know how I lost that version of you. I think I killed him." That one hit hard. Because I've been asking myself the same question for years. When did I stop being the man who lit up in her presence? When did I stop being enough? Or had I never been enough, and she just pretended long enough for both of us? But something about that last line, "I think I killed him," made my hand shake. Not out of pain. Out of clarity. She was right. That version of me? He was gone. But she didn't kill him. I did. I killed him every time I swallowed my instincts. Every time I let her words override what I knew was real. Every time I made myself smaller, quieter, more manageable, just to keep her happy. I had slowly erased the man I was, just to fit into the narrow frame she held up as love. And now, standing at the edge of nothing, I realized I had a choice. Not about her. About me. I spent the next few days sleeping in the truck, journaling in a spiral notebook I picked up at a gas station, and thinking about what a new life might look like. I didn't want to move to another town just to start over as the same version of myself. That would be a waste. I wanted something different. Not dramatic. Just honest. So I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. My cousin Roger in Oregon. He was the black sheep of the family. Lived in a trailer, raised goats, and sold metal sculptures at flea markets. Everyone joked about him at holidays. But I remembered something no one else did. Roger was always happy. Unapologetically, stubbornly, simply happy. He answered on the second ring. Well, hell, if it ain't Warren Fisher. You dead, or you finally quit? I left, I said. And I don't know where I'm going. Roger just laughed. Sounds like you're going here, then. We've got a guest cot. Smells like hay and rust, but it's got a roof. Get your ass out here. And just like that, a road opened in front of me. Not a dramatic escape. Not a revenge plan. Just a road. Before I left, I wrote one last message to Beth. I wasn't going to send it, just write it. But halfway through, something inside me said I needed her to read it. Not because I wanted her back, but because I wanted her to see what I'd become, someone she didn't get to break anymore. So I sent it. It said, "You didn't kill the man I was." I did. And for the first time, I'm glad. Because the man you shattered was never real. He was a version of me that existed only to be loved by someone who didn't know how. I don't hate you, Beth. But I no longer carry you. No reply came. And I didn't wait for one. The next morning, I left the motel key on the nightstand, folded the receipts into the trash, filled the tank, and drove west. It didn't feel brave. It didn't feel free. It just felt like movement. And that, for the first time in years, was enough. The drive to Oregon was quiet in the kind of way that starts to echo. I passed through endless miles of nothing, wheat fields, dust storms, open skies that made my life feel impossibly small. The radio was off. My phone stayed on airplane mode. I lived off vending machine jerky and lukewarm diner coffee. Somewhere in Idaho, I realized I hadn't spoken a word in 12 hours. It was both peaceful and terrifying. Roger's place wasn't what I expected. It was better. He lived in a converted barn up a gravel road behind a blackberry field that had taken over everything but the goat pen. When I pulled up, 2 goats stared at me like I owed them rent. Roger stood barefoot on the porch, welding mask flipped up, a cigarette tucked behind his ear. He didn't hug me. He just pointed to the screen door and said, "Fridge is full. Showers on the left. Cots in the back." That first night, I slept more deeply than I had in years. No dreams. No guilt gnawing at the inside of my ribs. Just the creak of the barn frame and the sound of goats shifting in their sleep like breathing furniture. Over the next week, I helped Roger with chores. Fed the animals. Hauled scrap metal. Painted the side of the barn a color that looked like rusted wine. We barely talked. And that silence? It was healing. Then, one afternoon, while unloading a box of metal rods behind the shed, I found something wedged behind a stack of old tires. A journal. Torn, battered, covered in soot and mold. I nearly threw it out. But something about the way the leather felt, warm despite the cold, made me flip it open. It wasn't Roger's. It wasn't even his handwriting. It was mine. Specifically, it was mine from 15 years ago. An old sketchbook turned journal I must have left here during a road trip, long before I married Beth, long before I knew what betrayal smelled like. Inside were dozens of pages. My handwriting was younger, sloppier, but somehow more honest. Entries about nothing and everything, sunsets that looked like fires, gas station conversations with strangers, a waitress in Montana I thought I was in love with for 24 hours. There were also drawings. Not good ones, but raw. I found one page that stopped me cold. It was a note to my future self. A kind of joke, written in a hurry. It read, "I hope you never let someone put out the fire in your chest. Even if they say it's too bright. Let them burn or walk away." I stared at that page until my vision blurred. That night, Roger sat beside me on the porch. We shared a silence that didn't feel awkward. Eventually, he said, "You remember who wrote that stuff?" I barely remember being him. I whispered, Roger leaned back in the creaky chair and took a sip of warm beer. He's not gone. He's just pissed off you stopped visiting. I didn't answer, but I knew he was right. In the morning, I decided to walk into town, a small place called Jasper Creek with a bakery, a barber shop, and a library that looked like it hadn't updated its inventory since 1991. I didn't go for books. I went because the library had quiet, and I needed to write again. I sat down in the far corner and pulled out a notepad. But before I could write a word, I heard a voice behind me. Warren Fisher? I turned, and there she was. No, not Beth. It was Carrie Morrison. We went to high school together. She was a year behind me. I barely remembered her, except for the fact that she always wore headphones and once carved "Silence is Beautiful" into a cafeteria table. She stared at me like I was a ghost she wasn't sure was real. I thought that was you, she said. You used to draw on your shoes. I looked down. I was wearing a scuffed pair of boots with paint stains. No doodles. I stopped doing that, I said. She tilted her head. Why? I didn't know how to answer. She sat down across from me without asking. I don't mean to pry, but you look like a man who got left behind by something important. I nodded. That's exactly what happened. She smiled, not in pity, but in understanding. Happened to me too. But sometimes the thing that leaves you behind isn't a person. Sometimes it's a version of you that just can't keep up anymore. That line hit deeper than I wanted it to. We talked for an hour. Nothing deep: music, books, towns that rot slowly while everyone pretends they're growing. But there was something about her presence, unforced, calm, familiar, that made me feel like I hadn't been entirely erased after all. When I got back to the barn, I didn't tell Roger about her. Not because I was hiding anything, but because for the first time in weeks, something had happened that didn't belong to Beth. And I wanted to keep it mine. A week after running into Carrie at the library, she invited me to help paint a mural on the side of the firehouse. I almost said no. The old me, the version still carrying a weight I thought I couldn't put down, would have stayed in Roger's barn, pretending he was too tired or too busy or too broken to join in. But that guy wasn't driving anymore. So I showed up. She handed me a brush and pointed to a patch of gray brick. This part's yours, she said, but don't overthink it. I dipped the brush in blue paint and hesitated. It's just a wall, she said. You're allowed to leave something beautiful behind. So I painted. It started small, a ripple of waves, a fractured mountain range. But then the shapes grew bolder, less cautious. And somewhere in the middle of that wall, something inside me finally broke free. Not a scream, not a cry, just the weight, lifting. For the first time in what felt like years, I wasn't carrying her anymore. Or the life we pretended was whole. Or the guilt of not being enough. Later that afternoon, Carrie handed me a glass of iced tea and asked if I wanted to join her and a few others for dinner down at the lake. I said yes before I could talk myself out of it. We sat under a sky smeared in pink and watched the sun lower itself behind the water like it knew when to rest. No grand speeches. No heartache. Just the smell of grilled food and the hum of content people who weren't running from anything. When I got back to the barn, I found Roger on the porch, sharpening a blade that probably hadn't cut anything since the Clinton administration. He looked up. You good? I nodded. I think so. He grinned. Told you hay and rust fix more than therapy ever could. That night, I wrote my last entry in the journal. It said, I thought I was shattered. Turns out I was just unfinished. I closed the cover and placed it on the shelf above the cot, right beside the photo of me and Roger as kids, holding up a fish we never caught ourselves. I didn't need to carry it anymore. I'd lived it. That was enough. As for Beth, I never heard from her again. Maybe she moved on. Maybe she found someone else to rewrite her story with. But I didn't check. I didn't Google her name or scroll through old photos. Because whatever she became, whoever she's with, it's no longer part of my timeline. And no, I didn't end up with Carrie either. We became close. Talked often. Shared meals, memories, silence. She knew pain in a way that didn't try to outshine mine, just sat next to it. And maybe someday, maybe that becomes something more. But I'm in no rush. I'm not trying to fill a void anymore. I'm just living the life that was waiting for me once I finally stopped chasing the one that broke. I live in Jasper Creek now. I fix fences. Help Roger sell junk that looks like art. Paint sometimes. Write often. Laugh more than I used to. And every now and then, when I walk by that mural, I run my fingers over the blue wave I painted and remind myself that part was mine. And it always will be. I didn't get my old life back. But I got something better. I got me.